With all the various prophetic words and prophets, it seems that President Trump is still a hot topic with them. I'll be interviewing one such person who seems to be getting words about President Trump before every indictment. Listen as my guest Josh Callis tells what he hears from God about Trump. We'll talk about that. Well, thank you for joining us once again for another edition of God's News in the News, current events and biblical perspective. Had a little bit of a hiccup there. I don't know what's going on. Seems like the last couple days I've been trying to do these videos and do these interviews, and all sorts of things keep showing up and happening. And I'm not willing to go down the road of saying it's all demonic. Sometimes tech just happens. But anyway, though, we're here, and so let's go ahead and let me just, and there he is. I'm trying to get this thing done here. Okay, yeah. There we go. Like, share, and subscribe. Those are three things you need to do to get this video out to where it needs to go, the algorithm. And Josh is just going to shake his head yes, because he's on the screen now. See, he does exactly what I'm asking. Anyway, though, so do those three things, and this will be these videos will get where they need to go. There's an algorithm that we can use to get this video showing up on people's feeds. So like, share, and subscribe. That's what I'm asking you to do. And since he's up here, I'll just put the stroll down here. I am the one and only engineer today, so it's all sorts of fun. So without further ado, Josh, are you there? Can I hear you? Oh, you know what? Now you can talk.
Hello?
Yeah, I had you muted. See, it's just one of those things, man. So this is welcome to the world of online streaming. You're getting a good dose of it here. So, like I usually do with most of my guests, Josh, what do you do for a living?
I know that's supposed to be a simple question, but these days it's kind of whatever the Lord kind of puts in my path. I guess if I could really sum it up simply, right now I'm doing some construction projects for financial income, but that will be somewhat temporary. And when I kind of finish that up, I think the Lord will have another assignment for me to do. I feel that coming up in my spirit a lot the last couple of weeks. But yeah, it's kind of a complex question. Just if I could simplify it, I would say I just do what the Lord tells me to do. That's kind of what I do.
I wish more people would have that kind of attitude. You're like what I call, like the Apostle Paul. You're a tent maker that just makes away things, and then that pays for what God plans, and we'll see what happens. So, doesn't have to be complex. I mean, yeah, now, what am I doing for a living? I'm retired. I did all my working for the man. Now I am the man. So, this is the paths that God gives us here. But more importantly, though, God's been using you in dreams and visions, not just about Trump, which we're going to talk about in a minute here, but just overall. So tell me about the journey when you started having that and you saw God was using you that way. Just kind of give us a synopsis of how that happened.
Okay, well, I'd have to go back to the early days of when I became a Christian. And I would say that I was having visions and dreams mostly about what the Lord wanted to do with me. But because I was such a new believer and I was the only Christian in my family at the time, I really didn't have an understanding of what the Lord was showing me. I realized that I was having those dreams and visions because of what happened more recently. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about that so the viewers would have some understanding. I lost my job in 2020. So that was one of those COVID things that happened. But it was something that the Lord kind of let me know was coming. About a year prior to that, I just felt like my time at that position was drawing to a close. But I told the Lord, I won't move out of this place until you move me. And that's how I'll know that, it's the right time. And so through the series of things that happened with COVID, I ended up losing that job. And I came into an enormous amount of time to spend with the Lord because I wasn't working a 9 to 5er. And so I took that opportunity to spend a lot of time with the Lord. And it happened that I was watching a man named Prophet Sadhu, and he was given a message on for the American church. I believe it was a word for the American church. And as he was going through all of the different things that the Lord had told him about in that vision and series of dreams and the words that he got, I kind of started to trail off. It often happens like when I'm listening to sermons and things like that. The Lord kind of will highlight something in my spirit, and then I almost, just tend to space out. And the Lord will start talking to me about that and showing me things about it. And so that happened during this prophet's sermon. And in the midst of that, I started to see Jesus extend his hands out to me with a present in his hand. And it was kind of one of those things where you just like, you see it in your mind's eye, almost like a memory. So I didn't even know that I was seeing a vision at this particular time. But I saw Jesus extending a present to me. And as I saw him do this, I kind of had one of those thoughts like, why is Jesus extending this present to me? I'm talking to myself here. And he just kept his hands out, extended like that, and kind of gave that, little shoulder nudge. I want you to open this. And so I began to open the present, took off the ribbon. It kind of looked like a Christmas present, and then flipped off the top of the box. And when I looked inside the box, I saw the word stone written. And then I was really confused because I was like, why is Jesus giving me a present? And then why, of all things, would he give me a stone? And so as I was contemplating this, I heard the prophet then begin to talk about how he had seen, or he was seeing, Jesus giving people presents. And so I just kind of snapped out of what I was seeing and thinking about why Jesus was giving this to me and started paying attention again to the sermon. And so he kind of went through this whole thing where he said, I see the Lord giving people presents. And then it got even weirder because he said, I see people receiving a stone. And the wildest part is then it looked like he was starting to speak to one individual. And he said that,
Could that be?
yes. And so he started to say that this stone was being given to you so that you know the next course to take in your ministry. And it will reveal to you new realms and dimensions of time. And that you won't just be a practitioner of these things, but you'll encounter them first, and then you'll teach others about them. And so when I went through that whole process and then was kind of talking to the Lord afterwards, I realized that I had actually been seeing visions for a lot of years as a Christian. But I just always had this idea that when you see a vision, a light comes down from heaven, the wall
Right.
disappears, you go up in heaven. And I guess that's not always the case. And
Excuse me.
so from that point on, I started to really pay attention to those things that the Lord was showing me. And then a whole new realm, a whole new dimension of dreams opened up to me. I started having several dreams about future events, which I didn't always know they were future events, but because of this encounter, I started recording all these things. And then I would go back and I would look at them and realize that these things are things that are happening in the world. And so I've tried to do my best to really record a lot of the different visions and dreams that I've been seeing. Um, and that was about in 2020. So it's been 3 years of really learning what dreams and visions are. I think the symbolism in dreams, interpreting them biblically, and all of that. So I would say that's kind of a very brief summary of how I've gotten to this point, obviously leaving out a whole big part of the journey. But as far as the dreams
Yeah.
and visions,
No, that's good. I mean, and everybody's a little bit different. I've interviewed Julie Green. I've interviewed some other people that how they get the words from God, and with you, it's similar, but it's different. And I believe God works with our personalities. He works with the way that we understand and hear things. One person I interviewed, Mary Crowley, God gives her words in the form of rhymes, which is, and then of course Robin Bullock, he'll start singing a prophecy, and it's like
yes,
God uses all these personalities the way that it uses their talents, so it's all very unique. And then the thing I liked about what you said was you said that you'd actually been getting more dreams and visions, you just didn't realize that they were that way. So we don't know how long you've been moving in this gift, but now in 2020, a lot I can tell me a lot of us had time to refine things.
yes,
And God, people debate about, was COVID-19, was it a pandemic? When all you can go down that rabbit hole if you want to, but I tend to look at what God did in us and how He made us. I mean, this whole ministry of doing interviews and online and this that all started because of COVID, because we couldn't get out of our houses. So
yeah,
we had to. There are things that happened, and God makes the best of them. He works all things together for good, even pandemics. So there you go.
yeah. I actually tell people that when I tell them the story that I just told you, I lost my job in 2020, and they, I immediately see their face kind of drop. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I was like, no, no, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. My relationship with the Lord has been far more deep and intimate because of that
Yeah.
time I was allowed to have with them.
Yeah. So that's good. Now, so let's get into some, the advertisement here. I mean, I've had all these videos I've seen where they talk about, this and that, and it's just a bunch of clickbait to get views. So I want to get into what I'm actually start off with this. Let's get into the Donald Trump things. I can tell you that I've had visions about Donald Trump, and I don't share all of them. I just share the ones God releases to me. But let's get to the more recent ones that you've had, because I know you've had other ones previously, but let's get to the recent ones you've had. You said when we were talking earlier that it seems like just before something happens to him, you get a word or a vision or whatever from God. Let's talk about those now.
Yeah, I would say that right now in this season, that the Lord tends to give me um, kind of a little reminder of things that He said in the past. So there's a certain sequence of things that the Lord has shown me, but it seems like right now in this season, He gives me like a little reminder before major events happen. And I
Yeah.
think he's doing that to remind me. I'm kind of in a place now where it's like I know that the Lord's going to do these things, but I think for the people that I talk to's sake, it's good to have like a little something to go along with what I've been saying all this time. So I really appreciate that the Lord does this. And with Trump, in I would say the last 2 years especially, whenever he seems like he's going to be in trouble, or at least that's what a certain group of people would like
And
to say.
all right, you're back in now. Okay. We lost you for a little bit there. I don't know if you can get your train of thought back.
Sure, sure. What was the last thing you heard?
Um, like I'm paying attention now. Oh gosh, this is embarrassing. You were saying that God gave you these things and reminders of what happened before, and
Okay,
then
okay, yeah. So right before Trump seems to get into trouble, these court
yeah,
cases, things like that, I've noticed that the Lord will give me a dream about him or a vision about him. And so
okay.
this most recent one was no different. A couple days before he went in to actually be arrested. I
Right.
was in a time of worship with the Lord, and I saw Trump at what seemed to be like one of his rallies. You know, it was that type of setting. And while he was kind of doing his normal speech that he gives, something struck him in that moment where he realized all that God had done to put him in the position that he was in. And when he realized that, it humbled him, it broke him, so much so that he actually began to weep, and he fell to his knees on that stage in front of everybody. Now, I've never seen Trump in that state publicly before in my life, so I paid attention to it when I saw it immediately. And once he went to his knees, then I saw a flash of the people's faces that were at this rally, and they began to tear up and be cut to the heart. And this wave of glory seemed to shoot out from that place all over. And it was like the name of the Lord, the glory of the Lord was being lifted up all over the nation and the world. And so I believe that there's going to come a point where that will literally happen. Trump will be so humbled by what the Lord has done for him going through this process. I don't know if he'll come to know the different prophecies that were spoken about him or how that will happen. But I do believe that he is going to have that realization with God. So that happened, like I said, a couple days before he went into this last indictment thing. And it spoke to me that he will still end up in the place where he's going to give these speeches. So the indictments and all that stuff that is happening, the Lord's going to deliver him from those, and he'll end up in that place where he can give the glory to God. I believe that he's in the place of his heart right now where he's willing to do that, and he's willing to acknowledge God. He's coming to that understanding. So that was the most recent one that I've had. I had another really strange one prior to that I can go into if you want me to go into that, or would you like
Well, before we go
sure.
to the next one, so a lot of times when these prophetic words are given, I don't think the words are the one when people get into trouble. It's when they give their interpretation. So you had how do you know how that interpretation was? It just a feeling, or did God give you a scripture, or how did you know that it meant that Trump was going to be in the position where he could do what you saw?
Well, in the dream, he was, or in the vision, he was in the position that he was. Like there's certain visions and dreams that I have that really don't require a lot of interpretation, and there's other ones that I've had that are very symbolic, and I pray for weeks, months, sometimes asking the Lord what I've seen. What is He trying to show me? And I've always
Sure.
found that the Lord gives me the answer. Sometimes it takes a lot of years. Sometimes it's very quick. Um, but this particular one was like, if I could say it this way, it was like a no-brainer vision. Like I understood everything that I saw. I
Right.
felt everything that I needed to feel to understand it completely. And I knew what I was seeing as soon as I saw it. So I would say that the process of learning the symbols of dreams is a real thing. Matter of fact, I don't know if I ever told you this particular. I gotta put this in here. So I was at a Bible study one time. This involves you actually, and I don't think I ever told you this story.
Okay.
When the Lord was first showing me that He was giving me prophetic dreams, and I was starting to understand the symbols of things in the dreams through biblical interpretation. You know, sometimes when, for instance, Daniel would have a dream, the angel would give him the interpretation. And so there's certain symbols
Right.
that almost always align with certain things. Okay.
Sure.
A good illustration would be like Revelation when the angel tells John that the woman, the harlot that rides on the seas, actually corresponds to nations. So when you see seas, they can actually mean people groups, nations, and things like that.
Yeah.
So as I was learning about that and contemplating, I was at this Bible study with a friend of mine, and I just had this thought all of a sudden where I was like, I think God wants me to learn how to interpret dreams for people. And just as I said this to her, my phone chimed. I opened it up. It was an email from you asking me to interpret a dream for a mutual friend of ours. So I took the phone and I
I
gave it
I
to her,
remember I remember
and
sending that.
I showed
Yes.
her. I said, "Well, I guess I have my answer." And so I knew I was on the right track after that. And so I really have been studying hard, trying to learn all the symbols and from others who already operate in this gifting. So I just thought I'd throw that in there because that's just how,
Good.
yeah.
Oh, God
And so
works.
sometimes it is like that, but with the dream thing, I would say it's a lot more symbolism. Visions are a little bit easier for me. And I would say of the prophetic words, the direct words that the Lord has spoken to me, where I've been
Right.
in like um, a time of worship for a pretty decent amount of time. This is usually when I get those. And the Lord will just speak very, very clearly. I don't need any interpretation for that. It's almost as if like I'm speaking to you. It comes across that clear. But I can count on my
Mhm.
hand the number of times that I've had those types of encounters. So there's definitely variation within uh, that
Sure.
those different contexts and what you're more familiar with and all of that. So with that particular one, yeah, that was one where I knew what I was seeing. There've been a lot of previous confirmations. It was just more of the Lord saying, okay, he looks like he's in hot water again, but this is going to be the outcome. So
Yeah.
don't worry, and encourage others who are looking maybe in anxiety about the situation that I got this and I already knew this was going to happen. So
All right. So, did you have something? I was trying, I was trying to put up the mugshot heard round the world with Trump from the indictment and the arrest in Atlanta, Georgia. Did you hear something about him before that, or was that the vision you just talked
no,
about?
actually, I believe it was the ones either earlier this year or last year when it was like right when all the cases against him started really piling up.
Right. Right. Yeah.
The Stormy Daniels thing, that was something that the Lord showed me through scripture, actually. He brought me
Mhm.
to the scriptures about David and Bathsheba. And that's how he showed me how that would kind of play out. Um, but there was another very interesting one where I had a dream where this was just before one of the court cases when they really started piling on. So it was after the Stormy Daniels thing, and then they really started piling up a little bit. I would say maybe like
Sure.
a week. I had back to back dreams about Trump. And the first one was Trump was taking me through what seemed to be a hotel, and he was showing me all the different things that were happening in the hotel. So he was aware of what was going on. Now, the wild part about this is, and the part that I don't have the full understanding of what I was being shown is, there was a certain floor where we went into a room, and Bill and Melinda Gates were on the floor, tied up. They were facing each other, and there was a platter of food that was put before their faces. And so they were tied up trying to get at this food that was sitting right in front of them. And as I was looking at this, I was like, wow, that's Bill and Melinda Gates. And, Trump is just kind of standing to my side, and he's looking and I'm looking. And all of a sudden, there's this demon that's dressed like a chef that comes to me and asks me, do you like what I've prepared for Bill and Melinda? And when I looked at the tray at first, it didn't look like abnormal food. So I was just like, I kind of shrugged it off, and I was like, I don't know. I mean, looks like food, and it wasn't weird to me in the dream that I was talking to this demon, but he was clearly a demon. He had like worms all on his face and really a hideous type of creature. And when I kind of shrugged off the fact that he was feeding them this food, he seemed to get kind of agitated that I didn't recognize what he was doing. And so then he took another platter, and it was one of those like fancy platters that have like the oval dome on the top. And he kind of opened it up. And then he started showing me the things that he had been feeding them. And it was like roadkill with like maggots and stuff all over it. And he just went through all the different things that he was serving them. And that portion of it kind of concluded then. I was wondering about it. What does that exactly mean? I still am not exactly sure to this day what that means in totality. But then I went up to another floor with Trump, and it seemed to be an atmosphere of almost like some sort of party. But it was like a crude type of party, like a frat party almost. And there was people chanting different types of things. And as me and Trump walked into the room, they recognized Trump immediately, and they started taunting him. And they were saying things like that he should kill himself, that he should just go away, all this sort of stuff. And so Trump was kind of like unfazed. At least I thought he was unfazed at first. But then he kind of said something like, okay, whatever. And then he walked towards the window and jumped right out the window. And the people that were kind of egging him on, because they were like, kill yourself, whatever, were just like, no way. And they all kind of ran to the window to see if he was going to splatter on the ground. And as he was just about to hit the ground, this parachute opened for him, and he kind of 007'd right to the ground and landed smooth without any injuries at all. And all the people that were formerly mocking him and saying all these things were just blown away that he seemed to escape death or certain harm. The very next dream I had was very similar, that Trump was on this high, like we have the Dells here in Wisconsin Dells. It's like a water park, so a big water slide. And he was up at the top, and this water slide looked like something 10 times worse than anything you'd find at Wisconsin Dells. It's very treacherous. And he jumped on this type of sled thing, and even he let out this kind of, oh boy, like as he went down it, came off the end of the ramp or slide, was up in the air, and I heard him kind of almost, like that, little hesitancy. But the same thing happened. He ended up just getting to the ground, landing super smooth, and then just kind of sailed on as if nothing had happened. And so once I had those two dreams, I knew that nothing was going to come of these court cases that were coming up. That, everyone was kind of wanting these things to happen. It looked like, they were finally going to get him, but he landed safely in both of the situations. Um,
Okay, so Josh, let me just
sure.
kind of jump in here. I'm sure there are people that may be watching now, or they may be watching at some point in the future here, and they go, "Oh, come on now, that's just a bunch of fairy tales. I mean, God doesn't speak like that." Well, we know better, and the visions and the dreams and whatever you're having now, they're not anywhere close to being as fantastical as in the Bible. There have been way bigger ones, more hard. I mean, Isaiah talked about King Cyrus 125 years or so before Cyrus was
Yes.
born. And there's so many different, if you look at the Bible, there are many examples of God giving people words that happened. Sometimes it happened like immediately, sometimes like a few days. Like it's just, we tend to have such narrow view now because we believe like the Bible, that's the Bible says that. People that are talking about that's extra biblical, and
Yes.
on it goes. No, God still speaks to his people today. And there was nothing about what you said that was out of just totally unusual. It's just that's God's trying to say to you, this is what I'm going to be doing. And of course, God's outside of time. So obviously he can do that. And if he wants to reveal, I mean, it says in Amos, he doesn't do anything until he tells his prophets first. And so we need to be a little more open to this. And really, what you're saying is, this is a way of God saying He's going, with the water slide and with the parachute, and it just says like He's going to look like He's in danger, but God's going to rescue him. And then you probably felt in your spirit that means all these things are going to come to naught. That's not that much different than, say, Amanda Grace or Robin Bullock or Julie Green or some of these other ones, Hank Kuhneman. They're saying similar things, but they all have different personalities and different ways that God gives
Yes.
that to them. So, it's like God wants us to know. Now, let me ask you something here, because I've dealt with this. I call it, the video I had on my channel, is the Trump distraction. And the reason why I call it that is that sometimes we can spend so much time on him and not enough time on why God's telling us these things. So before we go much further, why do you think the body of Christ, including yourself, are hearing these things? What's God telling you the reason for it?
Yeah, that is a much more concerning question for me, because
Okay.
the stuff with Trump wasn't the first things that I began to see. Um, One of the first visions that I actually had, and this I believe is kind of setting the stage for everything else that the Lord has shown me and why it's happening. One of the first visions I had was of Jesus going through a field, and his eyes were a flame of fire and his feet were on fire. And when I looked at him, I was actually startled within myself, like I felt the fear. And up until that point, I maybe one time prior to that, I had seen the Lord in that capacity, and experienced him and felt the fear of him that way. So when I looked at him, that's what I felt. I felt fear, and I immediately cried out to the Lord and remembered his mercy. So when I saw him that way, the fire in his eyes, the fire in his feet, I was like, wow, this is terrifying. But then I remembered, well, the Lord is merciful. And so I called out to him in the vision and I said, will you be merciful? And I remember he looked at me and his eyes were still a flame of fire. And he just turned away from me and kept walking. And as he walked, everything that he walked upon was burnt up. So it was like lush green plants, grass. He's in this field, there's trees around. But as he was walking through, everything erupted in flames. It was burnt to a crisp. And so he turned and kept walking and burning things up. And then as he was walking away, I heard 3 times, my judgment is just, my judgment is just, my judgment is just. Then a couple feet after all the charred grass and trees and everything, new growth started sprouting up. Really lush, beautiful, just, I mean, it looked like what I imagine the Garden of Eden must have looked like. Just wonderful. And then the vision ended. And I prayed for several weeks after that because remember, I was still pretty new. This was one of the newer visions that I had, what that could possibly mean. And the Lord started showing me all these different scriptures where it compared people to grass of the field, trees, like Psalm 67, 68. There's these comparisons. There's also one like where it says about like a man is like a tree planted by the rivers when they are in community with God. So all these different ones, but very specifically how the grass of the field is burnt up, just like a man is. You know, they're like a vapor. And so several weeks, I just kept getting all these scriptures. I'd ask the Lord, what do you want me to read? And he would lead me to these scriptures. And finally, being as slow as I am sometimes, it dawned on me that the Lord was showing me what I had seen in the vision, what these things represented. And from there, it really escalated into just major events politically, calamities and stuff. I started having major flood dreams, earthquake dreams, these waves hitting big cities. I saw Biden in some pretty dire states. And so, what I gathered from that first dream after having all these others now is that we're entering into a time where it's like the fullness of God's judgment, if I can call it that, is about to be poured out. Now, I want to say that when the Lord started showing me all these things, and I really wondered like what judgment really was and what the Lord was really going to do with that, He told me that some of these things that are happening are necessary to bring about what He wants to do. So even though they're going to look dark and they're going to be very troublesome, especially for those who are not close to the Lord and are, you know, kind of wishy-washy, don't have a solid foundation, these things are really going to shake people to their core. So, especially those without a relationship with the Lord, but also believers who, you know, are kind of walking that line between salvation and the world, walking with the Lord and walking without Him. And one of the things that I've heard several other prophetic voices say, and this is what the Lord told me as well, is that everything that can be shaken will be shaken. And there are going to be lots of loss of life for certain people. There's going to be major calamities that are going to hit. But this is all taking place so that the Lord can get rid of the root of wickedness that has taken place, that the enemy has tried to advance the times and the seasons of the rise of the Antichrist. And so it's like the Lord is holding that back because it's not that time for him to rise yet. But of course, the enemy is always moving towards it. And so it's almost like the Lord is going to allow things to get to such an extent to wake enough people up and start to realizing like the power they have, the authority they have in Jesus. And he told me that that's why these things are necessary. Matter of fact, when I asked the Lord about it, when he started showing me these things, I asked him the same question I asked him at the first, which was, will you be merciful? And the very sobering thing that the Lord showed me and asked me was, do you think about all that you've seen in the last year? And then all of a sudden, I got like a download of all the people that I told all these things that I had seen, and especially my family. And that was the really sobering thing. And how many of them just kind of brushed them off and didn't really take it to heart. And so the Lord, you know, asked me, did anybody respond? Is anybody paying attention? And I realized in that moment that there were still a lot of people at that point that were not heeding what the Lord was saying. Now, this was probably early 2021. And I'm excited to see that a lot of people have kind of started to come to understanding. However, there's a whole group of people that are still very asleep. And that's the big reason the Lord is going to allow certain things to take place to really shake every foundation that's not of Him. And that's going to be in a bunch of different realms. It'll be in the financial realm, economic, it'll be in the faith realms, it'll be in government. These things that, especially in America, I think we've come to take for granted are going to become very shaky ground if that's what your trust is in. So that's where I think the Trump part of it fits in there. You're very familiar with Kim Clement from the conversations we've had. He was
Yeah.
one of the first people that I encountered prophetically that I started to learn from as the Lord was doing this with me. So I knew about the Trump prophecies before he was ever elected. And I was talking to a lot of people on the job saying that these things are going to happen. This is prophesied. And of course, there's plenty of reels of different news outlets like CNN and MSNBC and a bunch of celebrities were saying at that point, Trump will never be president. So it was kind of like that for me at work, where I was telling people this is going to happen because I knew the prophecy and the Lord had cemented into my spirit that this was
Right.
true and he was an accurate prophet. And so then these things started coming into place. And like you said, a lot of people tend to focus on Trump and the distraction. I like to use him because he is such a big figure. So I'm not afraid to tell people that, the Lord is going to use Trump. The reason he's going through these things is because he has a place in a position to fulfill in God's plan. And when all these things kind of go through their fulfillment, I think using him because he's such a visible figure will be a greater witness than, say, if I talked about maybe one earthquake somewhere. Because a lot of people brush that off. They say, well, we've been having earthquakes for a lot of years. We get tsunamis every once in a while. But when those things come out having to do with Trump specifically, it won't be able to be hidden and it'll be hard to brush it off. So I actually like using him for that reason. And I'm glad the Lord, has highlighted those things about him as well.
All right. So let me ask you a question here. Do you right now there's an awful lot of debate. I'm going to do a video here probably in the next few weeks here, talking about the prophetic. There's going to come a time where there's going to be I don't know how, I'm trying to think what I was describing as. There's going to be a prophetic reckoning here in the next year or so, where all these people have been talking about this, and this, and it's like, it hasn't happened. A lot of these people now, they may demur on some things, but there's quite a few prophetic words that people said they heard about Trump coming back into office before 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And now, granted, it could happen very, very fast. I mean, all sorts of things. I just did a video about conspiracy theories and what we should do about them as a church. But there's going to become a prophetic reckoning on all of those things. Now, some people think that the prophetic is going to take a major hit because of that, and I disagree. I think that there are things that have to be addressed. I think the prophetic needs to be they need to have like the school of the prophets like they had in the Old Testament. And if somebody missed it, just find out why they missed it and move on, and then find out what is. But so many of these words are coming out. It's like, like you said, Trump's going to survive all these lawsuits. Well, to what end? Well, there's a lot of people out there saying, well, that's so he'll win in 2024. On and on it goes. Um, he is a lightning rod, and the Trump distraction to me is that we are spending so much time looking and wanting to know more about that and not doing the Great Commission and being active and doing work while it is day, because the night comes no one can work. That's my concern, is that people are not, God's giving us the bigger picture, and we're not going to be ready for when he decides to open up and give us an opportunity to do more. I think we missed it earlier, and this time through is like, hey, I'm going to give you a window of opportunity, to go out to the fields of harvest and get in there. I think he's giving us that, and for some reason, he's using Donald Trump to get us there. Now, does he have to do it as president? I don't know, but I do know that there are some people that have been very, very bold, and they were like double and tripling down, saying he's going to be back in office before 2024. Sometimes I kind of go back and I go, well, God, how's it going to happen? So that's just my 2 cents worth. What do you think?
Well, I don't have any confirmation from the Lord if it has to be before the 2024 election. But if you asked me personally, do I believe that that would be the case? I'd have to say yes. And I only, like I said, I don't have a word from the Lord on that, but I say that because I think with everything that's happened thus far, it would be far more fitting that he would get in a miraculous way. If it goes to the elections, I think a lot of people could dismiss that process as being relatively normative. And the other thing that's really been kind of irking my spirit lately is how great a length that certain individuals are going to try and keep him from getting into that position.
Right.
And so how far do you let that go before you have to deal with it? Because Trump himself has been very vocal that he knows that they're trying to do this for election interference. And if you watch any clips from CNN, MSNBC, certain outlets, they tell you plainly that if this happens, he won't be able to be eligible for office. So that's clearly the stated goal of the enemy. Now, the other thing I think is really interesting, and like I said, this is just kind of going to be way out there and speculative. It's not that I have a word from the Lord about this, but I've often thought, if the court cases cannot remove Trump from running for office, what lengths would they go to keep him from that office? And I just find it really wild that during this time, there's another Kennedy running for office. And there's all kinds of conspiracy theories about that. And actually, Kennedy himself talks about the assassinations of his two relatives, his uncles.
His uncle,
right?
yeah.
And he seems to think that's truth, right?
Well, Josh, I don't know if you know this, but Tucker Carlson he was interviewed by somebody, I think Adam Carolla, and he actually said if they can't get him off the ballot, Trump that is, that assassination is next. And he's not talking prophetically; he's just saying, follow the things there, And I'm acquaintances with some people from the Patriot Academy. I'm not going to say, you can look it up if you want to. Rick Green, and he has as a constitutional coach myself, I listen to him. I listen to his podcast. He joins us for the Coach's Corner, but he has been adamant saying that they want him to survive all this and run because they think they can beat him. And I'm sitting there going, that's not quite what I'm seeing. And we can agree to disagree. What I'm seeing is they're doing everything they can to sabotage anything that he can do. They're trying to. How many different things can you bring against a person? Now, had this been like a lower level politician, they'd be done by now. They'd run out of money. It just so happens Trump is in the unique position to be able to hire the lawyers to handle the cases and go on with it. But it's like, you can only go so far against this guy. And if nothing works, every time he gets indicted, he goes up in the polls every time, all this stuff. And it's like, is he the Teflon candidate? What's going on here? They impeached him when he was in office, and then they took the unusual thing to impeach him when he was out of office, which has never been done.
Right.
And it's like, and now they've indicted him 3-4 times, 32 counts here, 38 counts here, on and on it goes. this doesn't sound to me like their strategy is they want him to survive all that and win. If that's what they're thinking they're going to try and do, they're not playing with not playing with a lot of logic in my mind. But the prophetic is going the opposite direction. And so as a church, we have to find out, God, what are you doing with this man, and what do you want to do with this man, and what part do you want me to play? What does the body of believers, what are you saying to us? And it's like, I give it over to the Lord. I don't know. Like you, Josh, I haven't heard that anything about what's going to happen. Well, all right. I have to amend that. If you go back through, I've got like almost 200 videos. If you go back some of the earlier ones, back in 2021 when I posted them, I think February 2021 I started this YouTube channel, and the other places I've been, I started on YouTube. I had a video about sudden, swift, and sure, and that's how fast these things are going to resolve themselves. And then I had another one where God said it's going to happen in a single day. And
Yeah.
I'm not alone on that one. And so whatever's going to happen, it's going to resolve itself quickly. And to me, I don't, I don't know. I had another dream. So I've had some dreams about Trump too, and I don't share all of them. There's one that I haven't shared, or at least I shared with a few people, and they told me I was nuts. what
You kind
What
of
do
get
you do?
used to that, actually.
Got to get used to that. I was talking to Bull Polney, which you may or may not know. He's down at the Reawaken America tour in Nashville back in January, and we had about a 30-minute talk, and we were talking about prophetic words and having thick skin. He said, "Oh yeah, I'm there," but what I'm really trying to get to is that I had another vision about Trump being attacked, and it was a spirit of Jezebel, and that they had one more attack on him, and they almost took him out. He kind of slumped down against the wall, and then he bounced right back up, and then they didn't touch him again. That was the last of their things. But when Trump was on a stage, I think it was it felt like it was a gym in a school. He wasn't dressed in presidential attire. He was like a workman thing with the blue shirt and the jeans and everything, and he was talking, and then they came after him again, and then they couldn't do anymore. That was an unusual dream that I had there. But I took away from all that they're coming at him with everything they can, and they're continuing to do that. They're doing their level best to do everything they can to keep him away from the White House. And to me, that's not a strategy of saying we want to just build him up so we can tear him down in the election. That sounds to me more like desperation. And if you can't see that, I'm not sure what I can tell you. But to the church, I mean, let me ask you again, what do you think the message to the Church of Jesus Christ should be in all this? What's he doing? How is he preparing the church to be what they need to be through this? If there is, I don't know.
Well, I would say that one aspect of the church that God clearly is reviving, that's been kind of out of balance, I would say, is the prophetic and apostleship. I think the church. I mean, I've been a Christian about 20 years, so I'm talking about what I've seen in my lifetime. I was saved roughly around 2023 when God finally removed all my doubts, and I stopped believing those things were my encounters with Him were coincidences. But even from that time till now, I would say that there had been risings of certain individuals that were calling themselves prophets or calling themselves apostles or even pastors and teachers. There seemed to be this almost self-promoting minister that took on many different forms. I would say the most prevalent one that I saw was in the prophetic. And that seemed to cause the church in a lot of ways to pull back from a very significant gift that God had given to his church. And you have already quoted, Amos 3:7, which says that, the Lord doesn't do anything without first revealing it to his prophets. And it's weird for me to be now in the situation that I am, because I would say that there was at least some point in my Christian life where I become skeptical of individuals Um, but never to the point of denying the fact that God was still using people as prophetic voices, healing ministries, doing the miraculous, all that sort of stuff. So, in that sense, I think to bring back the voice of God, the vision of God to the church is one of the big reasons that God is doing things this way. In my 20 some years of being a Christian, I don't think I've ever seen this many prophetic voices
Yeah.
raised up at one time. But the bigger thing, I think, is it also seemed like in those 20 years, at least when I first became a Christian, that the church had kind of entered this phase where they thought that they could withdraw from the world and everything would just kind of continue on without them being salt and light.
Right.
And things became very seeker friendly in those seasons, and the gospel in a lot of ways became watered down. So I think all of that has kind of come to a head. Like things have gotten so imbalanced in the church that God is kind of having to do a big spring cleaning, if you will, and bring everything back into its proper place before, I would say, one last time before the Lord allows the Antichrist to have his reign.
Right.
And I believe in this particular time, I've seen some amazing things on the other side of it as far as God pouring out his glory. I know we're getting at the hour time here, but I'll
It is
share
what
just
it is. Yeah.
I'll share just a brief one. And this is actually why I also believe that the things with Trump will kind of come to its culmination involving the Supreme Court in some fashion or another.
Okay.
I was at a Bible study praying, Grandma Nancy, who you know,
Right.
and the Lord started talking to me about three things that he was going to do. And so one of the things was he was going to start to um, revoke's not the right word, repeal, almost like repeal things having to do with abortion, prayer in schools, and then the elections. Now, I was actually working with a pro-life group when Roe v. Wade was overturned. The reason I did that is because of this word. I knew that God was going to overturn Roe v. Wade. I remember sending a message to one of my coworkers at the time before I got let go of that job, saying that this was going to happen because she was very, pro-choice. And I said, "Well,
Mm.
don't you know this is coming?" And so I have that in the messages. And I was a part of a whole prayer group that we had at the church, and right in the midst of that, that got overturned. So that was one of the confirmations that the Lord had showed me that he was going to do. Then in that same period of time, I saw an article where a coach won a court case, the Supreme Court case about prayers on the field. I
Right.
forget that. Are you familiar with that one?
Yeah, I think he's going to be on the sidelines again this fall.
Okay.
Yes, I know. I'm familiar with it. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I forget the exact title of that one. But that was the second confirmation. And so two out of the three things have happened and they went to the Supreme Court. And this is one of the things I actually posted on my Facebook page prior to any of this actually taking place. So that's why I believe that however this thing culminates with Trump and the elections themselves will end up going to the Supreme Court. It'll be the last thing that the Lord talked to me about that will be repealed.
Right.
Um, but that's the kind of perspective I think that the Lord wants His church to have, is the perspective that we should have, which we should always know what's going on. We should never be caught in the dark. We should be operating in all these things because, at least for me, I feel like the very thing that I'm doing by testifying of the things that I've seen and heard from the Lord is part of what God is doing, meaning He's stating from the beginning all these things that were going to come to pass. It's like almost a story right out of the Bible, right? And so Trump as a character, he reminds me a lot of David, actually. If you look at Truth Social, you could easily see all those things that he posts in there as being similar to a lot of the Psalms, right? David's always saying, man, the Philistines are coming after me, and Lord, save me. Um, and
You
I,
know, Josh, you're gonna get me kicked off YouTube if you keep going like this.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know that's going on.
Don't worry about it. I got Rumble and I've got Twitter or X, whatever it's called. I've got back. I have ways to get to people, so I'm not worried about it. There was a time when I was like, if I get kicked off YouTube, then I'm done. And God basically said, no, I've got other ways to get the word out. So yeah, we are a little bit over an hour. That's kind of my target, and I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot to digest here, so that's good.
Sure.
But what that also means, Josh, is you might be showing up again on this podcast.
Okay.
You might be one of my regular guests here. So, and just a little bit of inside baseball here. Josh and I go to the same church. That's how I know him.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that he is as honest as the day is long. He's a dedicated believer. He if he says he's, all I can tell you is he's the real deal. Now, you may not like what he's saying, but he's the real deal when it comes to serving God. So I wouldn't have anybody on this podcast, this channel, unless I knew them to be a verifiable Christian, and they have the works to go along with it. So anyway, though, so I think yeah, we covered an awful lot. We probably didn't get to everything that we thought we were going to get to, but I think we covered an awful lot. Do you have any last words you want? I'm going to give you like a minute or two to kind of conclude everything here and give us a word of encouragement going forward, and then I'll pray.
Yeah, I would just say if you're listening to this, definitely take time, if you're not already doing so, to really get alone with the Lord. This is such a great opportunity, I think, for his church to draw closer to him and to really understanding like what he wants to do, what he is doing in the earth. And we all have, as a church, a part to play in that. And it doesn't matter, what that role is. Mine happens to be in dreams and visions and things like that. But I've realized, through these giftings and being a part of the ministries I am at our church, that every single part is important. And we really can't do the things that we need to do if people don't recognize the assignments and the importance of what God has given them to do. It actually, causes the other parts of the body to have to carry more weight. And so that would be my encouragement, especially for this younger generation, like the college age generation coming up.
Josh, I'm going to let you know you dropped out there. So whatever you were saying before, do you remember what it was?
Which part did you hear last?
Just keep going.
Basically, I just want to say, use this time to draw close to the Lord. Things are going to be shaky coming up, but it's for the church's good and for the world's good. But that's what it's all about, spending this time with the Lord, getting to know him so that you can be a part of the vision that he had for his creation from the very start. And God's going to pour out his glory in a way that no one has ever seen before in this time. So it's actually a really, really wonderful, great time to be alive, even though it's going to have its own challenges. So that would be my encouragement. If you haven't really been giving the Lord the time that you need to, start to do it, because you're going to need it. It's going to be a lot of fun. God's really going to bless his people, even though, like I said, there's some challenges, but it's such a great opportunity to get to know him and to be a part of what he's doing right now. I am really enjoying my life right now. I'm so thankful for these last 3 years where I got fired and was able to spend time with the Lord. So
That line right there, Mike, people shaking their heads. I thank the Lord for getting fired and spending time with him. Some people are not going to claim that blessing. So
Well, that's, we each have our
that's
role.
what
That's
happens.
mine. So I embrace it.
Okay, there you go. Well, Josh, this is not the last time you're going to be on my podcast here, and I'm praying that you will start your own and branch out and start reaching people through this media. I think it's still free. It's not being censored to the extent that I think it might one day be. I know Franklin Graham seems to think that the Christian content is going to be clamped down shortly here. I think Mario Murillo said something that's similar to that. But let's just get out there and keep doing it. And I'm encouraging you, Josh. But by the way, don't be a stranger. I may have you back on again. So,
Right.
anyway, though, I'm going to go ahead and close this thing down. Thank you for joining us for another edition of God's News in the News, which is current events, biblical perspective. And thank you, Josh, for being on here. And we thank you that. So, uh, do the things we talked about before, like, share, and subscribe. If you like this video and you think there's something important that people need to hear about it, well, tell them about it and get this message out to where it needs to go. But again, thank you for joining us for the special edition of God's News and News, current events, biblical perspective. We'll see you later.